He thought he understood women until you appeared. And suddenly everything he believed, every pattern he relied on, fell apart because you're not like the others. And that unsettles him. There's a moment when a man encounters a woman who doesn't follow the usual script. She doesn't chase, doesn't plead, doesn't compete. She stands firm in who she is. And when he realizes she's different, not just in behavior, but in depth, his entire perspective changes. Most men go through life thinking they know how attraction works. They assume that attention, charm, or a little confidence is enough to influence a woman. They're used to women reacting immediately to validation. They light up when praised, soften when complimented, feel shaken when ignored. But you broke that system effortlessly. You're not motivated by praise, and you're not unsettled by silence. He noticed this the moment he tried to impress you, and it didn't affect your energy at all. It wasn't defiance, it was self-possession. You weren't acting uninterested, you were simply anchored in your own identity. Most people don't understand how powerful that is. When someone cannot be swayed by external approval, they operate from an inner strength that others can sense. And he sensed it immediately. It's not that you're cold or detached. You're warm, observant, and deeply aware. But your value doesn't depend on who notices you. He's never been around someone who knows her worth so clearly that the world's opinion barely creates a ripple. It forces him to question the foundation of how he interacts with women. He's used to being the one in control, the attention giver, the one who sets the pace. But your steadiness removes his ability to lead through shallow tactics. You don't bend because he smiles. You don't soften because he compliments. You don't break because he withdraws. And for a man who relied on that pattern, your neutrality feels like resistance, even when it isn't. The deeper truth is this: when a woman doesn't respond to manipulation or emotional pressure, the man faces himself. If he can't influence you with ego or charm, then he must consider what he truly offers. Not just charm, not just words, but character, integrity, and effort. For many men, that realization is frightening because being worthy of a grounded woman requires real work. It's easier to stick with the old patterns, keep her slightly insecure, keep her slightly impressed, keep her reacting. But none of that works with you. You don't engage in emotional tug-of-war. You don't compete for attention. You don't chase. You stand firm with your standards and boundaries, and he must either rise to that or step aside. He feels the shift immediately. Suddenly, he's the one overthinking. He's the one wondering what you feel, not because you're playing games, but because your self-respect creates clarity. You don't send mixed messages. You send honest ones. And honesty is the hardest for someone unused to it. You're not mean, but you're not easily influenced. You're not distant, but you're not easily swayed. You have emotional boundaries, but not because of past pain, because you've built a life where peace matters more than attention. He senses that. He knows you're not guarding yourself from him. You're honoring yourself, and that alone commands respect. What unsettles him most is how effortlessly you maintain this strength. You don't lecture. You don't prove anything. You don't announce your rules. You live them, and nothing is more intimidating than someone whose actions quietly define what she will and won't accept. When he gives less, you don't argue. You step back. When he shows inconsistency, you don't chase clarity. You create space. When he tries to impress with superficial effort, you stay unaffected. That unshakable energy makes him confront every part of himself he usually hides. He feels exposed, not because of judgment, but because your presence makes his usual strategies ineffective. He wonders why he reacts to you differently than anyone else. He's never felt pressure to be genuine, consistent, and grounded. With others, he could do the minimum. But you bring out a better version of him, one that wants to rise simply because your presence requires it. Not with force or demands, but by the way you exist. Your clarity becomes a mirror, showing the gap between who he is and who he could become. Some men rise to this, others step back, and that's where fear appears. Deep down, he knows he cannot manipulate a woman who knows herself. He cannot charm a woman who sees past charm. He cannot sway someone who values consistency. You remove the power he once held, the power rooted in uncertainty and imbalance. Instead, you replace it with one truth. If he wants you, he must show up as a steady, honest, present person. That level of authenticity is rare, and he knows it. It's also the only thing that works with you. The realization frightens him because it means losing the illusion of control. He can't make you stay with empty effort. He can't keep you with promises he won't keep. He can't win you with temporary changes. You aren't moved by potential. You're moved by reality, and that forces him to face his own reality. He feels drawn to you, but also fears he may not measure up. He knows that to have a chance, he must grow stronger, more consistent, more disciplined. You don't demand it, but your energy requires it. And that's why you unsettle him so deeply. You break the patterns, you dismantle old rules, you don't play games. And because of that, you redefine the dynamic. You're not like others, not because you try to be, but because you are, in the most powerful way. You cannot be controlled by validation. You cannot be shaken by someone's uncertainty. You operate from inner strength most people never reach. And for a man unprepared for that, facing someone like you is not just surprising, it's overwhelming. Most men live within comfortable patterns, routines, familiar behaviors, rehearsed responses, and emotional habits that never challenge them. They're used to navigating relationships with little real growth. They can charm their way past mistakes, hide flaws, or lean on excuses. But when he meets someone like you, who won't tolerate laziness, emotional confusion, or half-hearted effort, his comfort zone crumbles. You don't fight him. You don't pressure him. You don't criticize. You simply maintain your standards, and that pushes him to confront parts of himself he's avoided for years. You don't accept inconsistency. You don't excuse words that don't match actions. You don't tolerate moods that fluctuate with convenience. You require alignment, effort that matches intention, actions that reflect promises, and presence that reflects commitment. That creates a different kind of pressure, not fear-based, not toxic, but the pressure of standing next to someone whose energy demands growth. Your expectations aren't unrealistic. They are simply clear. You won't carry both sides. You won't beg for clarity. You won't chase stability from someone unwilling to develop it. You've built a life of balance and self-respect. And if he wants a place in it, he must rise to that level. When a woman doesn't bend to weaknesses, a man is forced to face them himself. And that's where fear begins. You don't accept excuses. You don't normalize lack of effort. You don't comfort someone into staying the same. You call attention to what is needed simply by being someone who doesn't need chaos to feel fulfilled. Men used to shortcuts, games, and surface-level connection don't know how to act around someone seeking real depth. You refuse emotional immaturity, and that reveals his own. You won't meet him beneath your standards, which means he must rise higher than ever. What terrifies him is that you don't push with words. You push through presence. Your energy exposes the gap between who he is and who he could be if he committed to growth. Every time he steps back, you don't chase. Every time he gives less, you don't plead. Every time he slips into old patterns, you don't indulge him. Your boundaries act like a mirror, reflecting his shortcomings with clarity he's never faced before. That reflection is uncomfortable because once he sees the truth, he cannot ignore it. He notices his avoidance, hears his excuses, feels the difference between effort and empty performance, and sees how often he chooses comfort over growth. That awareness alone shakes him, not because you force it, but because your energy allows nothing less than authenticity. You're not asking him to be perfect, you're asking him to be authentic. But for a man who has relied on performance, being authentic feels like standing bare. You challenge him simply by existing. Your emotional depth reveals his emotional avoidance. Your clarity exposes his confusion. Your decisiveness highlights his indecision. Your discipline makes his lack of structure obvious. You don't aim to make him uncomfortable, but you do. Being with you means evolving, and evolving means letting go of every version of himself that once felt safe. Growth strips a man of familiar defenses, and stepping into a higher version of himself requires consistency. things he may have avoided his whole life. He is afraid because you shift the dynamic from comfort to accountability, and accountability feels like pressure when someone has never truly been held to a standard before. But it's also magnetic. Men don't step away from women like you because they aren't interested. They step away because the level of self-improvement required feels overwhelming. You're not just a romantic connection, you're a catalyst. Being with you would require him to step into his potential, not just talk about it. You aren't impressed by promises, only results. You don't celebrate potential. You honor action. You don't reward temporary changes. You respond to genuine transformation. And that terrifies him because deep down he knows the truth. If he steps up, he becomes the man he's always wanted to be. And if he doesn't, he loses you. There is no middle ground. You represent a turning point, an invitation to rise or retreat. And for a man who has lived inside his comfort zone too long, choosing growth feels like stepping into the unknown. But it's in the unknown where his real strength lies, and every part of him senses that you are the kind of woman who would bring that strength out of him. That's why he fears you, not because you demand too much, but because you require truth, effort, and growth. And those are the things that separate boys from men. He spent most of his life relying on a certain type of masculinity, the kind that appears strong on the outside, but collapses the moment someone looks deeper. He knows how to impress. He knows how to act confident. He knows how to play the role of a man who has everything under control. And with most women, that act was enough. They responded to charm, confidence, mystery, attitude. But you didn't. You saw through it, not because you were trying to expose him, but because you've evolved beyond the stage where surface signals can fool you. You don't fall for ego. You don't melt over swagger. You don't lose yourself in mixed signals. And that frightens him because for the first time, he can't hide behind the persona he perfected for years. You look past the exterior and focus on what really matters: character, values, discipline, emotional stability. You don't care how loud he talks. You care how he behaves when no one is watching. You don't care if he seems socially confident. You care if he's honest when it's inconvenient. You don't care if he looks strong. You care if he lives with true strength of integrity, responsibility, and commitment. Most men never had to offer that level of substance because the world applauds the image of masculinity far more than the reality. But you, standing in your grounded energy, force him into a different space, one where image dies and truth is clear. Every time he interacts with you, he feels the need to drop the act, not because you demand it, but because the act is pointless around you. When ego doesn't impress you, he's left with vulnerability. When games don't confuse you, he's left with honesty. When mixed signals don't bind you, he's left with clarity. And clarity is uncomfortable for a man who has survived in grey areas. He quickly realizes he can't win you with half effort or half truths because you don't reward chaos. You don't give attention to inconsistency. You don't attach to potential alone. You require something deeper, something he can't fake: authenticity. This is why he feels exposed around you, not because you question him, but because you understand him. You notice emotional shifts, unspoken intentions, patterns he didn't know were visible. You see when he's trying too hard, when he's retreating, when he's showing an image instead of a truth. You observe silently, but your silence communicates more than confrontation could. He senses you see him, really see him, and that alone unsettles a man who has worn emotional armor most of his life. He realizes he can't dominate the dynamic with pride or distance. You don't chase when he withdraws. You don't collapse when he becomes quiet. You don't reward coldness with warmth. You match energy with balance. And this neutrality shakes him because it forces him to face his emotional reality rather than escape it. He begins to understand that your standard isn't built on attitude. It's built on emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence cannot be faked. He either has it or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, he must grow into it. That thought terrifies him. He must evolve past performative masculinity and step into genuine manhood. That means listening instead of reacting, taking responsibility instead of deflecting, communicating instead of withdrawing, and choosing commitment over comfort. It's easy to impress a woman who hasn't healed, but it's impossible to impress a woman who has done the work. You've done the work. You've built a life where peace matters more than drama. You've learned the difference between attraction and alignment. You no longer settle for intensity without consistency, and he senses that his usual patterns won't be enough. He starts questioning himself. Why doesn't the old charm work? Why doesn't emotional distance pull you closer? Why don't games create tension? Why doesn't confidence intimidate you? The answer is simple. You don't respond to performance. You respond to truth. And truth is the area he hasn't mastered, not because he can't, but because he's never been required to offer it. Most relationships let him stay on the surface, but you demand depth just by being yourself. You show him that being a man is not about dominance, but discipline, not about ego, but accountability, not about control, but emotional maturity. You force him without words to examine the parts of himself he abandoned, his softness, his intentions, his ability to communicate clearly. And while part of him fears this exposure, another part craves it, because deep down, every man wants to be seen, not for the mask he wears, but for the man he really is. You trigger that desire. You awaken a new level of longing, not just for you, but for the better version of himself that emerges in your presence. But awakening that desire comes with fear, because stepping into that version requires effort, and effort demands courage. He knows if he stays the same, he'll lose you, and if he rises to meet you, he'll lose the man he used to be. That choice is terrifying, but it is transformative, and that is why you shake him so profoundly. You don't just challenge his masculinity, you redefine it. You don't just see the man he is, you see the man he could become. And for the first time, he realizes that the surface-level version of himself will never be enough for a woman like you. He fears you because you see through him in ways no one else ever has. Most people only notice the surface, the words he says, the gestures he makes, the story he chooses to tell. They accept appearances, overlook contradictions, and ignore patterns. But you are different. You read intentions, not just actions. You notice subtleties, detect inconsistencies, and understand the